Goedenavond iedereen, welkom bij ons voorlaatste debat, ons voorlaatste online debat deze zomer met de Polar Project. Kan kunst het klimaat redden? Can art save the climate? Our apologies that we're 20 minutes late. We had some trouble connecting Zoom to the Facebook Live, but now that's all in order and we are good to go. Tonight's event will be in English because we have three distinguished guests from Costa Rica. Sara Mata, Oscar Schmidt, and Christian Wedel. What all three of them have in common, all three of them are artists, all three of them have a strong connection with sustainability, nature, or climate change in their works, and all three of them have recently participated in a residency of the International Institute for Sustainable Development and the Costa Rican Ministry of Environment and Energy. They were exhibiting in the Museum of Contemporary Art and Design in San Jose, the Costa Rican capital. Sara Mata likes to create a new reality in her photography. Oscar Schmidt is the artist behind the design studio Obra Gris. He also has a strong focus on sustainability, on zero waste fashion and design. And Christian Wedel is a visual artist focusing on how humans represent nature and the impact that those representations have in our society. Recently, he did a few very interesting projects in Puerto Viejo on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. I'm very curious to hear more about that in a minute. Can art save the climate? That's the main topic of today's debate. Well, obviously not on its own, but the way we tell and write the story of a carbon zero future, how we include everyone in this future, that I think is something that artists can play a big role in. In the past, Costa Rica has shown itself already as a great master of storytelling. We will come to that later. But first of all, I would like to give the stage to the artists, or the virtual stage, to present some of their recent works involving climate change, sustainability, our relation to nature. Sara, let's start with you, and you can share the screen whenever you find it appropriate.
Hey, hello everybody. Well, I'm going to talk about the project that I did for the residency that we were all part of. And in this case, I'm going to show you in a few minutes. I was very interested in, I have always been very interested in the way we portrayed nature, landscape, and how we interact with those images about nature, especially in a country like ours, where all that images are always constant and everywhere. So in this case, when I was deciding how my proposal for the project, I found this other investigation that is going on here about how trees are growing in the forest, and how it is being affected by the changes in climate, and that is not growing as it is supposed to. But then seeing all that information and all that data you cannot see that when you see images of the nature here in Costa Rica. So what came to my attention is it was mostly how we interact with those images that are all very beautiful and exuberant, but they don't translate the data or information that we have about what's really going on in our environment. So in this case, what I did is I went to one of the areas that we had access to, and to work there with photography, because I'm a photographer, and I was interested in actually talking about that, how an image can translate in a way what information or all this research that all these biologists and scientifics are doing, that we cannot translate into regular images about nature, that I can actually be a little bit more confusing, because I think people always see these images of everything very beautiful, everything is very green, everything seems to be perfect, but when we read the information that we have, it's not like that. So for me, it was very, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot share my screen. It
Yes,
says
of
that
course. Go ahead, please.
I cannot. It says that I need the host to give me the permission.
Okay. Is it now? Not yet?
Let me see. Okay, yes, I can do it now.
Okay.
And so what I did, I was very interested in how what we're seeing in an image doesn't necessarily is what is going on. And that's always been something very important for me in my projects, about that relationship of reality or what we think is real and with fiction. And most of the times images are microfictions or some realities that we create in terms of what we want to say. So in this case, I just wanted to extend that in an image of a forest that is disappearing, and it has a text in it. I'm going to show you here. That is not quite there. You have to see it depending on how the light is reaching the picture. And what it says is in Spanish, but it says, I also disappear when you can see me, which it was my way to translate all the information that I gathered, that this forest, even though I went there and it's beautiful and there's a lot of animals and they have so many species. And if I show you most of the pictures that I took, it's just regular pictures that we see all over the place in every nature magazine or here, what the images that the country uses to increase tourism and things like that. But when you go there and you actually talk to the people that work there, even though it looks so beautiful and it's very nice to be there, that forest has faced so many changes and is still doing it because of all the climate conditions, and also because it is surrounded by other things that are affecting it. For example, when you are there, you are, some people will say paradise, but just a few kilometers surrounding this area is full of crops, of pineapple crops, things like that. So it's kind of like surreal in a way, because around this area, which is very big and is very protected and is very beautiful and exuberant, surrounding it there's a lot of things happening that doesn't have to do anything with preservation, and that's also affecting this part. So for me, it was more about making an image that in this case, my project was more about facing the fact that sometimes images doesn't go accordingly to the information that we have about nature, and how sometimes the images that we portrayed most of the times about nature doesn't have the same the function that we need it to be. Not that I'm saying that we have to show always like things dying, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but it can be confusing for people, especially here. I think most people sometimes we don't think things are changing because we're still seeing things growing and green and pretty, but as I saw them in this place, but the information that I have is saying that no, things are changing, the weather is changing, and also the growing of these trees and everything that is happening here is being affected by it. So for my project that I presented for this residency, that was like my main goal, to talk about what I just explained in terms of how things are doing and how we perceive them through images.
Mm-hmm. Okay, really interesting. I have a few questions, but I'll keep them for the debate for later. First, okay. I'll give the word to Oscar.
Hi, everyone. I'm also from Costa Rica. I'm from the northern province of Guanacaste. I grew up in Liberia, really close to the ocean, 20 minutes away from the ocean. So I've always had a big relationship with the ocean and with water. Growing up as a child, I was always interested in making things and creating things. My mom is also a maker. And growing up, I would see her working with textiles, making her own clothes, and making objects and painting ceramics, and making stained glass for the home. And so that really impacted me in my upbringing. And later on as an artist, I try to incorporate this in my language. I studied art in San Jose, and then I studied fashion in Berlin. So I'm sort of a mix of a maker, a thinker, and an entrepreneur also. I'm going to share screen now so you could see the project that I developed for the museum. This exhibition was especially special, interesting, and special to work in a collaboration with Oceanography Institute in San Jose. Through their mentorship, I was able to shift my focus of attention and add another layer to my textile work. Here touching on a different subject. I still wanted to speak about the ocean and problems that are happening in the ocean from climate change. What I'm showing here is actually a scientific image of sargassum seaweed. It floats both in the Atlantic and the Pacific. You can find it all throughout the coast. There's big spots where it grows in the ocean, and through climate change, with the water becoming warmer, then this type of seaweed is expanding continuously. And it creates a sort of a forest, a floating forest. When this happens, so what I'm actually showing here is sort of small, as you see. It can become around 1 or 2 meters long, and it'll float in the ocean and become really dense, so dense that it won't allow sunlight to come in through the water. So it's damaging ecosystems, because when there's light is lacking, then a lot of species that are hidden in the water or like inside the water are dying. So sargassum is expanding, it piles up then on the beach, it smells, and it creates a lot of imbalance. We don't see these things when we sit by the ocean shore and we see the weed. We actually try to avoid it, and we don't really want to swim in the water where the seaweed is at, where it's floating. You get tangled up in it. So the Oceanography Institute really gave me a lot of like biology lessons for artists, and I was able to turn all this information into into the piece that I created for the museum, which was an interpretation of biological elements, and also conversation with the technique that I employed here, that I've been working with for a bit now, macrame, knot making, and which also holds a lot of relationship to the ocean. You count speed in the ocean with knots. So there's also this whole idea of repetition that can probably relate to human behavior, repetitive patterns that then become damaging in the way that we live and the way that the planet is harmed through an interaction with it. All of the ecological problems in the world are design flaws that were caused by us existing here. So this piece, I tried to incorporate and resemble also sea urchins. People say it looks like coronavirus also a little bit with the wood. The textures are recycled plastic from plastic bags that were donated from the recycling center. Also a collaboration with the recycling studio here in San Jose. So I'm just going through the images. So the piece was rather big, 3 by 3 meters, and you actually had to go through it to go to the next room, and actually over to see Chris's piece, which he'll present in a bit. So these are all fragments of the installation. It took about 2 months to create and 1 week to install, and then 20 minutes to uninstall at the end of the exhibition. So on the seaweed itself, these beads are taken from the seaweed itself, and through these, they're hollow. These little beads, they're hollow inside, so this allows for the weed to float on the water. They're called floats, actually.
Great, thank you. Can you also tell us a little bit more about your fashion work?
Sure, I have another document to share. So in Berlin, working and creating garments while I was still studying, I was trying to put to bring into my garment line or my way of creating also a lot of my own heritage and upbringing. So I was always contrasting the idea of water with other things. In this case, it was water and asphalt, and water and roads that would have to be created for humans to actually be able to go into the water. It was one of my first explorations in the subject. Also trying out digital print on natural fibers, which I focus on in my collections. When I had to look for an inspiration for my graduation collection, there was a big struggle going on between Costa Rica and Nicaragua over who owned a specific island that was, you'll see in the next image. So this is a map from 1897. And the dispute was going on right at the time where I had to come up with an idea for my clothing collection, which was sort of a weird thing to be inspired by, you know, like a conflict regarding water. So this river divides both countries. It starts in the Nicaragua lake, as you see San Carlos, and then it goes down and it exits on the Caribbean. And so it's a natural division between both countries. I was inspired by the struggle and the political struggle trying to divide a mass of water between both countries, and how this becomes sort of a dividing issue when it's rather a thing that joins us, you know, like it's not a division, it's a union through water, but politically it was being seen otherwise. The fight between both countries had to be finally resoluted at the Hague, Den Haag in the Netherlands, at the International Human Rights Court, and this became my inspiration. I started sketching and playing around with cutting shapes and developing a methodology to use the full width of fabric so nothing goes to waste. Also creating images that would be knitted in cashmere jacquards and printed on silk screen, and would be seen in many different ways as textiles throughout the collection. These were shot in the studio in Berlin. The final presentation featured 16 different looks, all with different techniques where nothing would go to waste. Full width of fabric would always be employed. Many of my pieces have multiple possibilities to wear. So you can wear things inside out, back to front, front to back, and change them constantly. Upon my return from graduation, I had to visit the actual inspiration site and reshoot the whole thing, and this time have a different approach and actually meet the people who live where the issue was taking place, and realizing that they were really outside of the whole conversation. It was more of a political matter that did not involve the actual inhabitants of this place. And then also, funny enough, finding all the colors that I had used in the collection actually being in part of the landscape, you know, without even knowing it. I was mostly inspired by Google Earth, and I would just travel through the river on Google Earth in my Berlin studio, trying to come up with ideas on how to approach this subject. And then I developed different graphic shapes that I would use also as construction for the mini garments. So this is one piece that I came up with back then in 2010. We still have it in the line and we keep selling this. It was just shown in denim at the last Fashion Week here a couple of weeks ago. So the pieces were then shot on the actual inhabitants of the place. This was a 10-year-old girl who was walking around. These were a couple that had just made their way from Costa Rica. I put a jacket and a shirt on both of them. The cashmere jacquard, a dress that you can wear multiple ways with the Nicaraguan flag at the back, and images of the actual site. Two sisters wearing my accessories along with other things that they were wearing that day. So I would just come up to people. I had a bunch of hangers with the pieces, and I would ask them to wear them and take their picture, and I would give them a Polaroid in exchange so they could also have a picture of what had happened that day. And there was a different way to relate to the place, the water, the river, and finding different ways to actually know about the people that live there and try to care for them also.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much, Oscar. It also reminds me that at the end of the debate, I'll send the links to all of your websites in the group too, if people would be interested to see your work or maybe even buy your work, or possible, I don't know if you can send it, or if they would have to pick it up in Costa Rica, then they'll have a good excuse to visit. But I'll share all the links later on. Christian, let's move to you. Please tell us more about the project you are doing on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica.
Yeah, thank you. I was born in San Jose, but since I was a little kid, I had because of my family, we had a big connection with the Caribbean side. Cahuita, Puerto Viejo, the whole Talamanca region is really important for me. And the past years, I've been going there a lot and living there. And while I was there, I developed 2 projects that are really important for me, and they connect with the one that I presented in the museum. So I'm just gonna share my screen and go through my website. Just give me a second. Oh, it's not giving me access to share my screen.
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible that you can share your screen and go through my website, and I can guide you to the project, if that's possible.
I can try to. It would be easier if you can share your screen. Martin, are
But
you?
it says that I have to give access.
There you are.
Oh no, right there.
There you are.
Good. Okay. So while I was living there, I was writing this project that is called A Town for Plant People. It was this idea that I had. I was also reading a lot about trying to change the place that we humans see ourselves in this planet, and trying to put nature and plants first instead of humans' necessities first. And the idea was to look for local plants around the area where I lived, and try to replant them in chairs with the help of the community, like locals. And right in front where I was living, I met a guy that his dad is from the indigenous community, the Bribris. And I became his friend, and he's a gardener. He knows a lot about plants. So the idea was like to walk around a little forest that was right next, like a little jungle that was right next to my house, and try to find for different species and then transplant them to different chairs that I found. And this exercise was really interesting for me because there were some plants, for example, that were hanging, others that were planted in the sand, really close to the ocean. So it was an exercise of trying to understand what these organisms need to survive and trying to reproduce that in a chair. It was also important for me the idea of a chair because it was like an opportunity to place the plant in the place of a human. And also when you have all the plants together, they seem to be having a conversation. But at the same time, I was having conversations with other people about what they thought about plants. And with this guy, specifically with his name is Royle, he taught me a lot about how to take care of them. And he always referred to plants as friends, that you have to really look the needs of these specific plants and try to give them what they need. This first plant, for example, this hanging plant, it fits on the tree that it's hanging from. So we needed to find a right substrate for it. So it was in a tree. It started grabbing the whole chair. But different plants need different. This one is in shade because it grows under a tree. This one is more of a sun plant. It needs a lot of sun and soil, so it's a different kind of chair. And when I started this project, or almost finishing this project, and trying to think about other ways that I could change the place or try to understand the idea that humans have about nature, I started working in the project Tropical Futurology. This one is also important. It's the soil. I grabbed rocks, coral. The soil right there is full of coral, and I have also plants that grow in trees, bromeliads. Well, this one leads me to Tropical Futurology. It's the one that I presented for the museum. And right, in this part, I was trying to think about what stories we tell ourselves about nature. Like we develop our idea of what nature is through stories or what we have learned. And this guy was from a great region. He had a different view about nature because of the stories that he grew up with. So I was trying to dream about a future where plants are first and all the organisms that keep them alive are second. And so I was start to think what images of what kind of icons, what kind of monuments this future epoch will have. I was also traveling to San Jose during that time and walking through parks and seeing like the monuments that we have in parks, mostly about human colonists that came from Spain. Also trying to see the decorations of buildings that we use as humans. And I always had this parallel idea of how if nature was first, what kind of monuments, what kind of images we will have. And also in the setting that I was living, that was really humid and the weather is really hard. The way I drew also changed. It's more fast. I had like charcoal and paper, so these drawings were made in that setting. And also trying to connect more with like indigenous traditions of representing nature. This project is also like an ongoing project. I'm always thinking about this, even when I'm writing the name of the project. There was a time that it was called the plant kingdom, but the word kingdom for me represents a lot of destruction. It was not the right word for the project. So it's always a exercise of what kind of words and what kind of images we will need to use in the new stories that we want to tell ourselves about the future. This future that I believe in, where plants are first. This is the way we present the drawings in the gallery. And these are the individual drawings that I presented. This is just a part of the project that I developed, and thanks to them.
It looks great. Christian, it reminds me of of a debate that you sometimes have, the debate in which sometimes nature is being opposed to culture, or at least in the Western view, in which culture tends to be considered superior to nature, mankind dominating the planet and using nature to its advantage. So what I hear you saying is that this guy that was helping you, Roy, was it, who is part of a Bribri indigenous community, he has a different relation to nature than he considers them to be their friends rather than looking at nature from a kind of superior view.
Yeah, these kind of communities, they've been marginalized, so they have a lot of social problems also. It's not that they are like these perfect societies, nothing at all, but you can get really different and good ideas and relationship different than what we have with nature. So I try to look for these things that I notice, especially in indigenous communities, the way they relate to nature, and they use it as medicine. Also, there is a lot of a big community in Puerto Viejo that they use medicinal plants. So this connection with nature is really different from what we are used to in San Jose. That's my take.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Also, what you were saying, that you have to think and rethink the words you use, not kingdom, because it's also something actually in the end referring to the culture part and in the debate, and you can just project it on the natural world. So
Yeah.
what is the challenge for you to keep a personal challenge to overcome this artificial divide between nature, culture?
This maybe it's also about this something that I'm going to say. Maybe it's about also the second part of the debate. I'm not quite sure, but
well, let's
yeah,
move automatically to that part of the debate.
Okay, I believe that the stories that we hear and the art that we are used to, and the landscapes that we see, this is also connected with what Sara was saying about the images that we are sold about nature. They heavily impact the way we see ourselves and the way we see our society and the place that we have in the world. So for me, it's really important that art begins to dream and start to create what will be the new stories, the new images, and the new values that we want for the future. So it's hard because I'm used to a certain pattern of thinking, and I'm always, when I'm writing like a project, I'm using words that they are not usually the right words, so I have to go back to them. And it's similar with also gender fights right now. I always use, when you refer to humans, instead of saying humans, you refer as to man, and you are excluding women and other genders. So you have to go back and rethink that, okay, I have to use the word humans, not just man, because I have to include all the humans. And these are things that we are learned since we are little kids. So it's always an exercise of how I'm gonna write about this project, how I'm gonna talk about this, and what images I'm gonna use. There are also like writers and ethnobotanists that I read a lot that have helped me with this project. It's not that I'm inventing everything. I'm inspired by science fiction writers.
Okay.
No, there is a US ethnobotanist that also help with these kinds of ideas.
I think that's interesting, because then if we zoom out for a moment, then scientists have been warning us for the effects of global warming for decades now. No one was really listening. It took youth protest movements and extreme weather events now over the past few years in Europe, over the past few weeks and months too, to open many people's eyes. But still now many governments, policymakers are not really committing to what they promised. In the Paris Agreement, they promised to do everything to keep global warming down by 2% and aim for 1.5% by the end of the century. Right now, if you add all the national plans worldwide, we're heading towards 3.5% of global warming. So even now, with all governments recognizing the need of action it's still a complete disaster when it comes to actual policies. But what I kind of hear in the discourse of all three of you is that maybe the change we need has to be more fundamental. It still comes a bit from the surface, and maybe we have to rethink what is real and what is not real in Sarah's discourse, for example, or what is nature and how do we look at it more fundamentally. Sarah, how do you see that?
Well, in terms of art, I think the possibilities that art gives us is just to get into the conversation in a different way. For example, I think, I don't know for Oscar or Christian, but in this experience that we have in this residency, most of it, I think what was more important, or what I think it was more valuable, it was having all this information that sometimes it can be very hard to understand for a particular person that is not related, that doesn't know anything about scientific terms or biology. Sometimes most of the information that I've found, or the research, is very hard to navigate because you don't, maybe me as a regular person, I'm not familiarized with terms and how they trying to explain whatever they found. So in a way, art can be like another mechanism to turn other information that is laying around and turn it into something that it could be more accessible to other people, maybe not, but it indeed is a different language that can engage more people into this conversation. What the world need, I don't know if, I mean, this is just like something really small. I think in terms of climate change, what we need is just policies, and probably I think I'm more radical in that way. I think we just need to change our economic system, because the way it is right now is not going to, whatever we do, if we continue living the way we're living, I don't think we're going to see that many changes. But us as people that are doing things, creating things, that like doing creative work, it's more about engaging or putting something out there to have a conversation, that what is art is mostly all about, just to engage people in conversations, or it doesn't matter in which how you want to do it. You know, it could be about joy, it could be about humor, or something more sad, I don't know, but it's just the way everybody approaches it. And I guess yeah, I mean, we can contribute in that way, just to be part of the conversation and to encourage more people about learning, even ourselves. I think the three of us learned a lot about this residency, things that we had no idea. And basically that, because I mean, I don't know if we have the tools to actually like truly change something, like, but that's my opinion. I think we can use what we're doing to generate ideas, and maybe, as I said, conversations, or maybe even accompany some policies. But there's some limitations also. And there's also the other thing, that not many people have access to even what we're doing, to go to a museum and to see what we're doing. That's also like very limited. So that's also kind of another wall that we have there.
Are preaching to the choir, right? Are there solutions to break this wall?
Well, I guess, I mean, if we don't think there's a solution, what's the point, right? But I guess having like this type of encounters that we're having now, and I know that different institutions or the people that organize this residency, that's what they're trying to do, to have more people engaged, to bring more people together, to have a discussion, to put all these conversations on the table, and not disregard all this information to politicians or the people that are doing research, because I think that has been going on for most of the past years, that it has been just a conversation between a few politicians and some researchers, and people don't think that actually something's wrong going on. Like they hear about it, but especially people in certain areas, of course, there are already people being seriously affected by the consequences of climate change. But also we need to hear those people more, like because there's a lot of voices that are not being included also in this conversation, and that's also something that we also need to like be very careful about that, you know, to see which people are we listening to, because there's people that have been talking about this for many years, indigenous people from communities that live closest to the beach or areas that are being very affected by the climate change, and we haven't been paying much attention to them either. So
Oscar, Christian, would you like to add to that?
Sure. My mom tells me stories about when she was little and she'd go to the zoo with her class. And instead of bringing a plastic bottle, she would bring a glass bottle because plastic bottles didn't exist. But you'd have to be conscious about how you carry your bottle. Don't break it. You're gonna need it for the rest of the day. You take care of your bottle, and then that's how things went, right? And plastic came in and it started screwing things up. There was a ban recently here on plastic straws. No more plastic straws in Costa Rica. Only recycled or compostable or paper straws. So if things like small little things like this can change, then everything can change, you know. But there's this fixation on fossil fuels and oil and corporate greed and money, and it's a really big monster to fight, you know. I keep listening about, you know, how if the weather changes, if the temperature rises 4 degrees, then 50% of all animals will die. So this means my 6-year-old niece is not going to be able to see many of the animals that we've seen ourselves growing up. And for tourism, which is the main income or the main business here for the country, this would be terrible, you know, like that's what people come to Costa Rica for, to see nature. So it's our job to protect it and also to show in which ways it's being tampered with. I myself think about all the visitors to the museum. I don't know if right now with COVID, but before COVID, there would be schools visiting the museum. So I keep thinking about children coming to the exhibitions and learning about art and processes and what inspires people to create. So I really do think that art has a big door open to show people imagery and to place stories in a different narrative. So climate change can become more of a visible threat, you know, and some of these processes are happening in places where we don't see them, you know, like my piece was about the ocean. We don't go in the ocean and think, oh, what's this seaweed doing here? And how did I contribute to this seaweed being, you know, growing and killing other fish and other species? And so there's all these different processes that are hidden. And I think art has an important way of making things visible.
What scientists or journalists can do is inform people. What artists can do is touch people. Do you think maybe that's more powerful? It goes deeper?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at cold data, it doesn't speak to you. But when you show it differently, then anybody can understand it, you know.
Christian?
Yeah, I was thinking just also with art, there are certain restraints that you don't have. Like with science, you have like the whole scientific method, but with art, you have a lot of freedom, like to dream and to create things that that comes. You don't have to. I mean, you have a freedom that usually you don't have in other areas. So I think this is really important that we, as artists, a really important tool that we have as artists. But I was listening also about this, the ban of straws and all the regulations that we have on protected areas, for example, that Costa Rica has a lot of protected areas. And I was thinking about how sometimes it's a little bit frustrating that humans need to have protected areas to not destroy nature, that you have to basically tell them, this area you cannot destroy it. This area you cannot take from here and kill all the animals. So every time I know that these restrictions are really important, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist, but I always think that the problem is deeper. It's not about banning plastic or banning this or that or having these restrictions. It's about fundamentally changing our relationship with other organisms and other things that are alive. And I believe that art gives me this access and give us all this access to dream about other possibilities and make them at least real in an image, or it's something that it's important for me as an artist.
Do you consider it your job as an artist to be critical towards policymakers, holding them accountable?
I mean, there are so many artists in the world that there are some artists that will be critical and that will be their job. It's not mine at this moment what I want to achieve with my art, but it's a possibility because with art you have this freedom, you know. So there are artists that are more critical about social situations, and others maybe have a different path, but you know, the possibilities are endless with art. I do think that it's really important to have these policies. It's really important to ban plastics. It's really important to have this as much protected areas as possible. But deep inside, I know that it's a bit, I mean, it's not gonna fix the problem in the end. For me, what it's gonna fix the problem is that we as humans change the way we think about ourselves in the planet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sara, I think you are a bit more on that, in that perspective, no? Or definitely more critical to the story being told. I remember, I think, reading in your bio on your website that as a Costa Rican, you had to live with being natural and being without any artificial ingredients as great fictions that you had to live by, that were told to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody here, that's a big part of our identity, the identity that the country has created for the people. You know, is even like our slogan, Costa Rican slogan is Costa Rica Esencial, which is essential, meaning like nature.
Pura vida, which is very famous.
Yeah. But yes, I mean, here is what makes people more proud of is nature. And that's probably, and that's our main attraction when it comes to tourism. But I guess, yes, I didn't grow up, I grew up in San Jose. My relationship with nature is not that, it's not very affectionate. So sometimes when I see all this, it's like I don't feel part of it, especially when, not because I don't enjoy these places in Costa Rica. It's just because when I see like the political policies, and then when you see how we live every day, as Christian said, how we relate to nature every day and how we deal with it every day, is not very, it doesn't go with all this narrative, you know, like that we are supposed to be this type of country or this type of people. Of course, this country has done amazing things like protecting areas because otherwise they wouldn't exist, or there's a lot of people like activists like working hard every day to sustain many of the things that we have. But still to this day, I think it's taken very lightly. Like, oh yes, we have beautiful beaches and we have great rainforests and we have all these cute animals, but that doesn't change the way we relate or the way we interact with all these places. And especially what I've been basically turning my what I've been researching, or what I'm interested is how we relate to this idea through images, and how it just doesn't match. At the end of the day, it doesn't match how we behave and how we interact with nature and how we see nature through images and all these wording and all these narratives that for me is very fictional. It's just a construction, and it should be more less about this construction of how beautiful we are as a country, more on how we are behaving towards it, and what are we doing, what are we demanding from the people that are in power. So yeah, for me, that has been a little bit of a struggle, and I think that's kind of the fuel of most of the work that I do, just to simply take a look at how we have in terms of identity, images, and how we portray that and how we behave with that.
Okay. Christian, you were telling me when we were talking before this conversation that in the Caribbean side, you have the feeling that that it is more about nature and the connection to nature, less about money. Do you think there are regional differences within Costa Rica too, and at certain parts you can actually find that this connection to nature is stronger than elsewhere, not just in indigenous communities?
Yes, I also want to add something about what Sara was saying connected to this question. Puerto Viejo is fueled by tourism. All the money there, all the jobs are because of tourism, and they do sell that it's like a paradise, like a beautiful paradise. And just living there, it's absolutely beautiful. Like the ocean is amazing. You have all these animals around you. It feels like the jungle is winning. It never feels like the constructions are taking over. And the people that usually move there, they have a strong sense of taking care of nature. Sometimes in other parts of the country, maybe the kind of constructions that they do and the developments more like huge hotels that have a stronger impact in nature. And in Puerto Viejo, it tends to be like small developments, like small hotels run by families. But connected to this image that we have that Puerto Viejo is a paradise, and there is always a lot of issues with trash recollection. And when the peak seasons of tourism get there is trash everywhere. And I don't know if it's because the policies are not good enough to recollect trash, or because people are not thinking about, as Oscar says, having like a glass bottle instead of plastic. I don't know what's the problem, but these communities always have a lot of issues because of tourism. There is always water shortage, and the community don't have enough water in peak seasons because use most of the water. So there are always things hidden from this image that is a perfect paradise for tourism to go, that I think it's important to take in consideration. I do believe that that area hasn't developed as much as the other coast, but there is always this risk that everything is going to get destroyed. This feeling that maybe next year they're going to build like a huge hotel for tourism, and things are going to change.
Yeah.
So feeling is all.
It's something universal in the whole world, that if you want to protect nature, you can only do it when you give economic value to it. You cannot protect nature if you don't build ecotourism around it. That goes, of course, from this people-centered view, where in the end it's all about us humans and the rest of the world is at our disposal. Oscar, you're from Guanacaste. You said Guanacaste is known, among other things, as being the main power source of the country. One of the things that Costa Rica really prides itself with internationally is that they run for almost 100% on renewable energy. This is something that Belgium and many other countries are extremely far off of. In the end, we need to move that direction too, but we're extremely far from that. Would you consider that to be a big win of Costa Rican policies, or as a Costa Rican, do you feel it differently? Your sound is off.
Yeah. I'm muted now. Yeah, as Chris was speaking before, I was already contrasting in my head the idea of the Caribbean and the Pacific, where I'm from and where I'm at right now, actually. couple blocks away from the beach. So
Yes, make us jealous. Thank you.
Yeah. I've seen this change over the last however long I've lived. I'm 40 now. So when I was little, everything was really different and all the beaches were pretty intact. I had classmates that would come into town from all different places to go to school because it was the only school that would teach English. It was in Liberia, the city where I'm from. And so a lot of them were expats or children of expats. They were born here, but then they would always have a sense of belonging elsewhere. So I've definitely seen the differences from then and now. And there's a lot of constructions, a lot of houses, beaches that were before that they wouldn't have a road now. I remember when I was little, we would go to the beach where the Four Seasons is at right now. It was really hard to access. There wasn't a paved road. It was just a bumpy road. You'd have to go down only on a 4x4 wheel drive. And there was nothing there. And now it's a Four Seasons. So a lot of tourism also locks locals out of what they're entitled to. You know, like you go to places where you can't afford a beachfront property anymore. There's all these expats and all these tourists that are making everything a lot more expensive. So it alienates the locals and it blocks people away from what it's there for everybody, you know? So I do believe that ecotourism and biodiversity, and I think I lost the point of your question though, from the beginning. You were speaking about renewable energy.
Yeah, whether that's actually basically we're talking about image in a way too, right? How about storytelling in the end, how the country presents itself internationally, and then Costa Rica does a really good job presenting itself internationally as a very sustainable, ecology-minded nation. Of course, it comes with a lot of downsides. So I was wondering whether this. The way Costa Rica presents itself with its renewable energy policies, if it speaks to you, if it's something as Costa Ricans you can be proud of, or you feel like no, because it comes with too many doubts and downsides.
It's conflicting for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that drew me to Costa Rica with the Polar Project, we're doing an investigation there. And I think what is very interesting is that Costa Rica is kind of a master in storytelling. They did it the first time after the 40s, I think, when they abolished, after a period of civil war, they abolished the army. And this climate activist, Costa Rican climate activist, Monica Araya, I don't know if you know her, she was telling me that back then already, politicians realized it's not enough to say to abolish the army. So we will abolish the army, and all the money that we save with that will go to free healthcare and education from now on. And that kind of worked, and you had a big story, inclusive story that you could motivate the whole population with. Then I think it was in the 60s, 70s, Costa Rica was the country having the fastest deforestation rate in the world. Then a new government came to power, and against the advices of the international institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, they said, let's stop doing that. We're going to reforest the country. We're going to start focusing on ecotourism. And I think the whole world now struggles a bit with finding this right storytelling in the climate debate. And then now, a few years ago, there's the Costa Rican government saying, we want to be the first climate neutral country in the world, and another big story. Do you feel that this is at least the first step to move forward, or don't you give too much importance to this narrative? It's a question to all three of you. Go ahead.
I mean, I think it's good, but it sounds very good. As I said, in paper, when you go and give a speech, it sounds beautiful. But for example, we have a terrible public transportation system, mm-hmm. and there doesn't seem to be like something in the like near future to change that. For example, transportation. There's too many cars in this country. Most people depend or rely on having a car. And so when you hear all those things, and then you go out on the street and you go and see houses and they have 4 or 5 cars, it's like there's a complete disconnection between what some politician might say and how actually things are, people are seeing themselves in this conversation. As Christian said, like there's no connection sometimes in the way we behave daily and the way that some people are trying to portray this country. I guess I think it's great that it's on the table, that we have it there, and that it is a plan. It would be worse if we didn't. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work to do, lots of work to do. But at least, as I said, it's good that it's there. That someone says, oh, this is our plan, and we think that it's going to be done like this. No, there's a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of pushing from us as Costa Ricans to do regarding the people that we are hiring, because governments we hire to do their job.
Yeah, well, if you look at the bigger picture, Costa Rica is, in terms of environmental protection, but also in terms economically, politically, stability wise, it's one of the few countries in Latin America that didn't have a second wave of civil wars and military dictatorships. If you look at many indicators, Costa Rica is doing a lot better than almost any other country in Latin America. Wouldn't that be the success, the fact that actually you are doing better than a lot of surrounding countries, but you remain to be very critical and you demand more from your politicians?
We need more management policies. Like my fashion project, my business, it starts from avoiding waste altogether, right? It's like, why make stuff at all? Was always my question. Is like going into fashion school or fashion business is like, there's already enough stuff for people to wear, you know, like I don't need to make anything new, you know, like, so if I'm going to make it something new, it has to come with a different mind frame, and also as an invitation for people to question what are their consumption habits. Why do you need to buy stuff at all? Mm-hmm. There aren't any clear waste management policies here. Like everything goes in the same bin. There's hardly any recycling happening. Like we don't have separate, like as much as people would like to say, oh sure, yeah, it happens, it doesn't. Like in the city, like when does the recycling truck come by? We don't know. They say toothpaste. I've never seen it. And things like this, it's like we don't separate plastic from other stuff, right? There's microplastics in the ocean where everybody comes and spends lots of money to stay in their fancy hotels at. There's plastic all over. Plastic is my main concern in my battle, right? So that's where
a very polluting industry. The fashion industry worldwide is still horrible when it comes to sustainability.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Christian, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel proud of being a Costa Rican, and the fact is true that we don't have an army and we have good education, healthcare. I mean, I feel proud of being Costa Rican and having a lot of nature to really at my reach. You know, the way I had contact with nature my whole life, and also with the other 3 artists here, we have like a level of education that we can discuss all these subjects and be critical about the things that we know that need to change. Like the trash regulation is the same where I live downtown, so it's the same. There are a lot of issues that need to be resolved. But as you said, also ecotourism brings money, so I mean, the government is going to try to go for that carbon zero emissions, and that all works out in the end. And I think it's a good thing, you know, at least things are going to be better for nature. But see, it's not enough to have policies. It's something deeper that we have to, all as human beings, not just as Costa Ricans, we need to change, I believe.
What is the essence of it to you?
Sorry?
And what is the essence of it to you?
Of disconnection.
Yeah.
To realize that there are other organisms in nature, other things that are alive, and we are not the only ones here. That there is also a balance that needs to be kept. We go around thinking that we are the center of everything, and don't realize how big and how complex is the system that keeps life in this planet, and that keeps us alive. So I think this is something that is really important to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I guess it's most I would like to think that changing that mindset is very important, because if we manage to change that, we can demand different things. But it's also, sometimes I feel very frustrated. I'm going to be honest. I try to be more conscious about the way I live. But sometimes when you read things on the news and you see other things and see how money is spent or how much money is in just a few people, is very frustrating, to see how to see the engine of the word, how it works. It's really frustrating. So that's when I don't know how to express it. I just feel very frustrated. I know that we as individuals can do things or get together as a community and start doing things, but sometimes I just feel like that is very hard for me to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sorry if I'm being too pessimistic when I see that there's very strong forces that I don't know how to fight against those. I just don't. I mean, I try to do it on a daily basis with my actions, or how I teach myself things, or how I listen to other people, and how I consume, or if I not consume at all. But yeah, for me, my feeling right now is not in despair, but it's a lot of frustration. And sometimes I just go from one side to the other, depending on how is the information that I'm getting. But I guess we just have to resist in that way, like just to keep going and try to see in how in our end we can contribute and do something that could benefit or could do something in the near future, because it's not like in 200 years, it has to be like now. So that's also like the thing, like we have this pressure that has to be right now, like because we've been hearing about this for so many years and nobody did anything. Nobody thought that. I mean, when I was in school, I remember my teacher saying water is something that we will always have water, always, when I was 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. So now the new generations understand this way more better than us. But for me to think that maybe 25, 30 years ago, it was okay to think that nature was there to be used, and that we were going to have it every day. So it's a lot of things to process in such amount of time, a little amount of time. So that's why sometimes I get frustrated. I'm not saying that there's nothing to do about it, but sometimes I do get frustrated when I see many people doing their hard work, and then when I see maybe 2 people doing, like, just destroying what maybe hundreds of people are doing. Sometimes that's very frustrated for me.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, frustration can lead to great art, so keep being frustrated, I would say. We're well over an hour already. I don't know if any of you have any last words. What would you like to say to the Belgian audience? Come to Costa Rica or don't come? We have too many tourists already.
I would say do come and take your plastic back with you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think tourism is also a huge topic. This country relies on tourism. It has suffered a lot with the pandemic because our economic relies a lot on it. I do think, and this is my hot take, is that countries like ours that rely on tourism should start figuring out another way.
Mhm.
Because this cannot be our main source of income. It cannot. Or at least the way it is now, it cannot. Especially also as Costa Ricans, as Oscar said, some places in this country are not accessible for us. They're only accessible for rich tourists, not even like conventional tourists, rich tourists. So that way of founding the economics of a country is not going to work in the long term or even in the short term. So I do think tourism is something that we also need to reconfigure, because the way it is right now, I don't think is going to be good for us at the end.
Mhm. Christian, any last words?
No, I do feel that there are all kinds of tourists coming to Costa Rica and different options for tourists to come to Costa Rica. Ones are more maybe in tune with taking care of nature, and others are obviously a huge impact in our country, like big hotels chains. So also, if people come to Costa Rica, be conscious about it also, that everything that is laid out there for you needs to be taken care of. It's not just there for exploiting.
Mhm. Oscar, the last words are for you.
I would still encourage people to visit, and also visit the museums, not just hit town, not just hit the national parks, but also try to see what's up and what's being questioned out in the culture, right? Because then you will see a contrast, you know.
Yeah, you have some education to do there with your own policymakers and people in the capital, because both times I was in Costa Rica, in San Jose, basically everyone advised me to get out of the capital as quickly as possible. Also the people from San Jose. So it's great to hear a counter voice, and I will for sure visit your studios next time I'm in San Jose. And I hope many of the people watching now will do the same. I want to thank you a lot, all three of you, Sara, Christian, Oscar, for participating in this debate. I also really want to thank the audience for being here. This is not a logical thing anymore. It was easier a few months ago when we started these online debates, because everyone was still confined. We had to stay in our homes. We were not allowed out. Now there's parties again, bars are open again. So for everyone who even now in summer did the effort to be here online, sitting in front of his computer, thanks a lot for that. We will have one last debate of the summer next Tuesday. We will have two incredible guests talking about how we can improve the climate debate, how we can get more people aboard. You'll be hearing a lot more about that tomorrow on our social media pages. Thank you so much, Christian, Sara, and Oscar, for participating. Have a good night.
Thanks, Jan. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.